The sort of romantic philosophical side of me says bring your full self to work, and then the employment lawyer in me says we're encouraged to use AI. When it first came out, I was fascinated in this. I was like, is this going to end lawyers' jobs? And you ask it a really basic question. You ask it, what is unfair dismissal law? It's stuff that everyone should know, and actually people don't know it until they really need to know it.
Hey, Matthew Bates.
Hello.
Yeah, first time I call you Matthew.
Yeah, you can call me Matt. That's no problem.
Okay, Matt Bates. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, welcome. I'm really looking forward to this first podcast. So
yeah, and honestly, I think this is a very important one for everyone to listen to because I'm gonna have a bunch of questions, selfish questions in the end because this is stuff I should know.
It's stuff that everyone should know, and actually people don't know it until they really need to know it.
Yeah, that is that's pretty much it. For context for everyone listening, well, you used to be an English teacher.
Yes, very briefly.
Yeah, I stalked your LinkedIn. You used to be a radio host.
Yes, recreationally.
And for how many years have you been an employment lawyer now?
So in total, 6 years working in law. 2 years of those were training. You have sort of a formal training process. And for 4 of those years, I've been a qualified employment lawyer. And qualified is the term that after you've done your period of training. So yeah, 4 years proper lawyer, 6 years including baby lawyer.
Okay. With saying qualified lawyer, maybe this is a good time for you to put in your disclaimer.
Yes. So, and I'll address this to the camera. I am a lawyer and we will be talking about some employment law aspects, but this is not legal advice. This is just general discussion in and around employment law, and all views are my own and not that of the firm that I work for. So, disclaimer done, lawyerly bit out the way, we can get cracking.
Perfect. Maybe with just a follow-up, just so that I understand it or know how to interpret what you said correctly, and so do the listeners. Does this mean whatever you say we can use as a starting point for our own research, or when we reach out to an actual lawyer? Or
yeah, I mean, look, anything we will probably be, I imagine, getting into bits in and around employment law. But it's all just discussion and for interest. And if anything interests you or is particularly relevant to you, then feel free to go ahead and do your own research. It's more just a point that there's no basis to rely on anything I say for any legal action you may bring or currently be embroiled in.
Yeah, no, I will make sure to quote you if I ever need to.
Yeah, he said on a podcast.
Exactly. So. Yeah. All right. I thought actually conversation's already going, but just to warm up your voice even a bit more and to give people maybe a bit more of a tease for why they should listen to this episode and specifically to you. I have a few quickfire questions.
Yeah.
Some, of course, you can maybe say a bit more than yes or no.
Okay.
But maybe just keep it very brief, 1 or 2 sentences.
I'll try my hardest.
Some of them might also be your own opinions,
okay,
as you mentioned. Oftentimes when companies are recruiting, in the vacancy it says, at this company you can bring your full self.
Mm-hmm.
What is your opinion on bringing your full self to work?
So the sort of romantic philosophical side of me says bring your full self to work, and then the employment lawyer in me says absolutely do not bring your full self to work. So make of that what you will.
All right. That means I will no longer be the same Seb at work.
Just be a work version of yourself.
Yeah, that's good to know. Should I keep a list of everything I do at work?
I think it's always good practice to do that, especially, I mean, I even keep like a feedback email folder on my Outlook that I drag and drop things into. Yeah, do it. I think it's good just from a self-protection point of view and also from a sort of annual appraisal feedback point of view as well.
In a post-COVID world with working from home and the return to the office policies, are companies allowed to track your office check-ins?
Yes, and they do.
Oh, that's actually good to know.
Yeah.
Because at work we were like, they're not allowed to do that.
There's probably something, I imagine, in a privacy policy that you have signed up to as part of your employment contract that will allow them to track office attendance. Do you tap in?
I do tap in.
It's all logged.
Okay, I'm fucked. And I need to read if I actually condone to them collecting that data. All right. Then 2 quick questions about when can a company actually set rules for bonus payouts. Can they set the rules?
Yeah, absolutely. They do. And some companies, especially those that are in financial services, have regulatory obligations to set bonuses in certain ways. So lots of times bonuses will be entirely discretionary, and they'll be subject to things like clawback or forfeiture, or they'll be deferred for a certain number of years. So you might get your bonus this year, and it might be, let's say, great year, you get 30K, but you might only be able to get 10K each year for the next 3 years. And if you leave in 2 years' time, you don't get that third.
And the company has full authority to be like, hey, this is how we structure it. I guess it's in your contract.
Your contract's probably quite light on what a bonus says. It might say something along the lines of, you'll be eligible for a discretionary bonus, and then they'll have a bonus policy somewhere which sets out in more detail how it works and how it operates.
Okay. With return to the office rules, can they change the rules at any time?
Again, depends on what's in the contract, but generally, yes. Most people, I imagine, unless they have something different in their contract, it will say, your place of work is blob, your office, and then they'll have a policy subject to amendment that says you must come in 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. And that, because that policy is discretionary, they might put it up, put it down.
Okay. Then with AI becoming the new hype in fair dismissal law in the UK, I think it's called fair dismissal law.
Yeah, it's the unfair dismissal.
Okay, yeah. Would it be a fair reason to dismiss someone because there's a new AI tool that automates your job?
Yeah, if a new AI tool is brought in at work and that effectively replaces some or all of a job such that there is a diminished need at the company for that job, then that is potentially a fair reason for dismissal on the grounds of redundancy.
Interesting. So there's no law says use human labor if possible compared to...
Not yet.
Oh, wow.
But it's, AI is new and exciting, and who knows? If it comes for all of our jobs, then there might be sometime in the future sort of minimum human requirements.
That is true.
Yeah.
Let's just hope that there's universal basic income in that case. Yeah.
That would be a whole other. That would be really exciting. I remember it was like 4 or 5 years ago that became a really big talking point, universal basic income, but it sort of died a death.
Yeah. Yeah. I have my opinions on that, but that's not what the episode is about.
No, we can get next time. Bring me back.
I'll bring you back just for that. Final quick fire question is, what would you say is the most important skill set of a lawyer?
Fundamentally, the most important skill set is knowledge and expertise of the law. It's a knowledge industry. People come to you for that. But there is so much more besides knowledge and expertise. And I don't know if you want is it quick fire? Do you want me to get into those?
If you want to, you can go a bit further in.
Yeah, obviously it's a knowledge industry. People come to you and they expect you to know the law. And to know it well and accurately, but that's sort of like the minimum baseline requirement of what the job entails. You have to be able to think strategically and commercially with that law. So if someone comes to you and says, look, we've got this poor performer, we want to dismiss them, we need to get rid of them. The most useless type of lawyer is one that says, this could potentially be an unfair dismissal under Section 94 of the Employment Rights Act, because it's useless advice. What clients will want is someone who can understand the law and apply it strategically, apply it commercially, and apply it in a way that helps the business achieve the need that they want, and not be necessarily dictated by what legal risk is there, but to identify the legal risk and help mitigate that legal risk in a way that works for the business. And for an employment lawyer as well, that requires a huge amount of emotional intelligence, because you are dealing with people. And you need to have an understanding of what it is like for the person who is on the receiving end of any advice you might be given, how they are likely to react, what their next steps might be. And you have to factor all of this on so that when you give advice to your client, they are able to see the future, the various options, and how that might play out so that they can make an assessment.
Yeah. Well, that was actually a very good and long
Yeah.
answer. And
I know it was quick fire rounds, but it's difficult for lawyers to give quick answers.
I mean, you asked, if you could give a long answer, and I said yes. You went into a lot of things as well, like into the emotional parts and outcomes. We're done with the quick fire question.
Okay.
Let's understand a bit better. First of all, what do you actually do?
Yes.
Because I guess with the title already, employment lawyer, people make interpretations. I have a set of questions, of course, which is interpreted on what I think you do in some rudimentary research, but
grounded in suits and all the rest of it, right?
Yeah. But besides working until 3 a.m. on a Friday night,
it was bad.
Yeah. You look great for considering you've worked till 3 a.m.
Yeah. So I've been in the office earlier today, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, what is it that keeps you in the office that long? What does an employment lawyer actually do?
Yeah, I can give a high level summary of my job, what it entails, all that kind of stuff. So I'm an employment lawyer. I work for an international law firm. We have offices all over the globe, Asia, Europe, obviously in the UK, which is where we're headquartered. And it's an incredibly varied role. I would say about 60% of my role involves litigation. So litigation is where an employee is suing an employer. There's been a breakdown in the relationship. There is a dismissal. There is alleged discrimination or whistleblowing, all of these kind of issues that are actionable before a court.
Do you support both sides? Like, can both sides be your customer, like both the company or the private person?
We only act for companies.
So
we don't act for
person.
Individuals. Not necessarily. No. So we only act for companies. But we do have we do pro bono work. So we work for a lot of charities through that, and we're encouraged to do 50 hours of pro bono work a year as minimum, which is all counts towards our billable targets. So I do act for individuals and charities through pro bono work.
Yeah. So today counts as pro bono work.
Today is pro bono work. Yeah, we're on the clock and I'm billing it.
Yeah, perfect.
So 60% of my diet is that kind of litigation, effectively defending claims that have been brought against our clients, which is, I think for me, the most it's the bit of my job that I love. And I'm very blessed to work in a place where the majority of our work is litigation. I'd say about 30% of the rest of my work is what's called advisory work. So this is where clients might have questions about their contracts, their policies. They might be transferring businesses. They might be transferring employees. There might be issues with employees that they need guidance on within the frame of sort of employment law work. You might be undertaking investigations into issues, which is basically where you're parachuted into an organization to conduct a fact find on alleged misconduct or breakdown relationships, things like that. So that's about 30% of my work. And then 10% of my work is what's called like corporate support work, which is advising on the employment law aspects of mergers and acquisitions. So broadly, when a company is being acquired by another company, unless the reason for the acquisition is driven heavily by intellectual property or driven heavily by tax, effectively, company A wants the people at company B and wants to bring them in and have them work for company A, or, sit them as a little subsidiary somewhere. So those employment aspects are really important, making sure that people are effectively the assets that drive businesses. And, we think about companies and corporate entities as being these sort of like standalone bodies, but it's really just a collection of individuals working towards a common task. So when you're buying a company, those employment aspects are really important to make sure, because it's no good buying a company if everyone up sticks and leaves the next day.
Yeah. You said litigation was your favorite part.
Yep.
How come?
There's that like old trope that, when like kids are young and they're like, oh, he's really argumentative, you'd be a really good lawyer type thing. I don't know if that was something that like you heard growing up, but effectively you are hired to defend a company, and the employee has hired lawyers who are excellent at their job, really, really top lawyers who come at you with really challenging legal points, commercial points, and your job is to like write letters back to them, disagreeing with their arguments, attacking their arguments, contradicting their arguments, sitting on phone calls, negotiating, all that kind of stuff. And it's really challenging. You receive a claim form that can be 40 pages long, detail events over numerous years, and you have 28 days at most to file a defense before the court to investigate the issues, and then effectively to take that all the way to being in front of a tribunal or a judge at the High Court. And whilst we don't do the advocacy, you're part of the team that is basically presenting those arguments and then trying to win the case for your client. So it's challenging. It's incredibly rewarding.
Is it, I know Jordan Peterson always talks about that arguing for him as like a type of competition, which is the joy.
Yeah.
Would you say that's exactly that?
Yeah, it's really, a lot of lawyers are competitive and they're people that like to win. And, you know, when I play sports or I play board games, I'm definitely in that category of people that just really like to win. And, you know, you have to be super respectful as well, in the sense that I derive pleasure from helping clients achieve their goal, but fundamentally it is something that is really tough for both sides. Like, litigation is not something that you ever want your client to be ended up in, because by the time you're litigating, there's been a breakdown of a process of both sides reaching a negotiated outcome, which is in their best interest. Like, winning at court is the best worst case scenario. The best scenario is A, that it never gets there because it's resolved way before it becomes litigation, and B, that if those steps towards a final hearing are initiated, that you've all kind of worked together to stop that and mediate the issue and conciliate and stop it getting to that point where you're having to have a judge decide on who's right or wrong. So I think whilst I enjoy that aspect of my job, I think I'm conscious that it's not great for the individual who is suing, and it's not great for the individual that's being sued. And all parties will try to avoid getting there as best they can.
Yeah. Always in my head, I always try to make comparisons. To me, that sounds very similar to what you want in a relationship, right?
Yeah.
You want to make sure you figure out all the small burning points beforehand before you actually break up.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it is a relationship. I think the way I do a lot of like graduate outreach as part of my role, because we have a lot of graduates come in and train with us, sort of be their baby lawyers and then qualify lawyers. And when I'm trying to give my sell on employment law, it's exactly as you said about relationships. I mean, I think there's a fate for like 4 big relationships. Like when you're lying in bed at night, that will keep you up. It's your significant other, it's your family, it's your friends, and it's also your employer. Like, that relationship you have with your employer or with people at work is one of the things that will keep you up at night, which will define many times your well-being.
Yeah.
And if that relationship's great, then wonderful. And if that relationship is poor, then it can be one of the most tumultuous and terrible things. And then it's when that relationship breaks down that things get really sticky. I mean, if you think about, for example, what it would take you right now to go into work tomorrow and say to your boss, I'm suing you.
Yeah.
Like,
takes a lot. I need to be really upset.
You need to be really upset.
Yeah.
And probably upset for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And probably feel really sort of righteous in your hurt because you feel affronted.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of situation we're talking, like, stuff has gone wrong.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, when you need good employment lawyers.
In what kind of projects are you involved?
Mm-hmm.
Or you also mentioned, for example, you work on projects where emotional intelligence is important, that you understand how would people react. Can you give an example maybe on one of those?
So, yeah, I mean, typically I can sort of do both, right? I mean, typically we're dealing with issues of alleged unfair dismissal. So someone has been let go for performance issues, and they say that either the process was unfair or there weren't performance issues, and actually it's because their boss hates them for some reason, or they may allege it's because they're being discriminated against on the basis of their protected characteristics, or they might allege that they have blown the whistle, so they raised an issue to do with compliance or the law, and they've been marginalized because of it. So those are the typical kind of issues that we're dealing with. And when does emotional intelligence important? Well, emotional intelligence is really important throughout dealing with all of those issues before they become litigation. So, for example, someone might want to have a conversation with an employee who's underperforming, and they might ask us for advice on how we make sure that conversation is, legally compliant, firstly, and protects the company from a legal perspective, but also just more generally on like, how do you make that conversation go well? And so you have to put yourself in the views of, if you were brought into a room by your boss tomorrow and they wanted to have a conversation with you about your performance, how can you phrase that conversation in a way that doesn't make you feel like you have no choice but to lash out or protect your position or escalate the position? And how can you do it in a way that helps achieve better performance and sort of more harmony in the workplace, which is what everyone wants.
Yeah.
But the problem is that so often communication is poor, and we don't communicate in a way that allows both parties to feel heard. And therefore, that's when people become entrenched, and that's when fallout's going to occur.
Yeah. Do you have any advice in terms of conflict resolution or communications in general, considering that is probably, I assume, the bread and butter of your job?
Yeah. Huge part of my job is effectively calling up lawyers on the other side who are representing their clients, communicating your client's position, they communicate their client's position, and you effectively try and resolve the issue. And a really interesting thing about the UK legal system, especially employment law, is that it recognizes, as I said, that a hearing in a court is the best worst case scenario. And so before you can even bring an employment claim in the UK, you have to enter what's called early conciliation. So you have to go to this body called ACAS, and you have to effectively get a certificate that says that you've tried to conciliate with your employer. And so ACAS phone up your employer and say, hey, like, I've just spoken to Seb. He's thinking about bringing a claim for X, Y, and Z. Like, do you want to go speak to him? Do you want to try and sort this out? So you have that phase, trying to sort it out. It doesn't work. You're allowed to bring a claim. And then during the tribunal process, you can have what's called judicial mediation, which is where both parties, if they consent, they effectively sit in different rooms, and a judge comes in, and the judge ferries between the two rooms, listens to what this party wants, listens to what that party wants, and tries to help you reach an agreement that stops you getting to court. So I say that as just general context on how important conciliation is throughout the legal process. In terms of tips, or what I think is important in reaching a negotiated outcome and avoiding court, I think the main thing is understanding what is driving that person, and that involves active listening. I think so often, especially when there's a fallout, you think you know what is driving that person, and they might tell you what's driving them. You might not believe them, but it's really getting to the crux of what is it that this person wants, and what can we do to meet them in the middle, and what is a resolution that both parties can live with, even if it's not the desired outcome. For some people, they want their day in court. So, so that's where it goes. And then, but then at least you know that.
Yeah.
So I think the most important thing for conflict resolution is firstly identifying what it is that both parties genuinely want, and then what it is that both parties will live with. And then how do you get from the wants part to the acceptance part?
And would you say in court or even before court, understanding what someone wants, is that in any way different to what we know in day-to-day relationships we have with people?
I think it's exactly the same. I mean, all of those kind of EQ, emotional intelligence skills, I think are really important as an employment lawyer, but are also really important in other parts of your life. So exactly as you said, I mean, if you find it easy to have those conversations in your day-to-day life, the tough conversations, then you might be really good for that kind of soft skill side of being an employment lawyer.
How have you practiced understanding what people really want? Because I always feel like that is something I am very bad at. Like actually, if I've been thinking about it a little bit now that I'm doing this podcast, because I have 0 episode published at this given point in time. So in this point in time, the only people I'm inviting are people who actually know, because I assume some people might do it a little bit as a favor to me, but I also find it hard to understand why they want to join. Like, is it because they feel appreciated for being invited, even if it might not have any listeners? Or so how do you practice really knowing what the other party wants?
Yeah. Well, you ask them.
You literally just ask.
You ask them.
Oh.
Yeah. You get on the phone to their lawyer and you say, like, what is it that your client wants here? Like, that's a generalized point of view, because sometimes you might say, you know, here is what our client is willing to give, and then you work out, you know, what within the package that is feasible here, what will work for your client, what won't work for your client. But generally, it's having those conversations and just getting to the bottom of it, because you can guess, you can beat around the bush all you want, but unless you actually know what it is that the other person wants, it's hard to resolve it.
How often do people disclose what they actually want, and how often do people actually know what they want?
I mean, people will, usually the way that negotiations go is someone will, it's a lot, we call it horse trading.
Okay.
So they will say, I want £1 million. And then you say, well, that's too much money. Here's £10,000. What they actually want will be, as in what they can live with, might be a much, much lower number.
Yeah.
But it's all a part of the process of getting to that number. So you can ask what you want. You might not get the right answer back, but it's indicative of the kind of ballpark you're dealing with. Because if someone comes back and says, well, we want £1 million, then you know the driver is money.
Okay.
You know that it's not having a day in court, or it's not, you know, ensuring that new training is put in place or something like that. You go, okay, well, the resolution that is required here is financial.
Yeah.
And so you at least have a guiding point and a steering point.
And here the deception you from your example is they try to deceive you in the amount of money that they need. Is there ever a form of deception of, I say I want apples, but in reality I want bananas?
Yeah. I mean, there might be, but it wouldn't be a very good, it wouldn't be a very good strategy, if that makes sense. I mean, and when you say deception, it's more so like negotiation. Like if you find a flat that you really like, then you might, well, maybe that's a bad example. I'm just trying to think, you know, it's that classic, if you go to like a second-hand car salesman.
Yeah.
And he's put the car on for like £5,000 and you know it's worth 2,000, then you might lowball your offer first so that he brings the number down accordingly. So that's just part and parcel of how negotiations tend to work. Because you would never typically in negotiations go in first with your best and final offer.
Yeah.
You try and, you know, and it's a bit of a dance, and both parties know it's a bit of a dance, but it's just the way the negotiations tend to happen.
Are there any other, when it comes to negotiations, are there any other techniques or strategies that come to mind that you might use regularly? Or
there's loads of different schools of thought. I mean, typically what we will do is you will make an assessment when we're speaking to clients. Let's say it's acrimonious, it's heading towards litigation. We want to make an offer to them, or they've made an offer to us. That's when you have the conversation of, okay, well, can we identify their drivers? Yes or no? You know, have we asked the question, what is it that they want? Do they want their job back? Do they want money? Do they want support finding a new role? All of that kind of good stuff. And then in terms of negotiations, one approach might be to hardball, to say you're not getting anything, and really, you know, especially if there's not very much merit to their legal claim, you might try and hardball. Other times you might assess as quite a high, significant legal risk, and that therefore you need to effectively, if you want to mitigate that, put something more on the table. So effectively, it all depends on your negotiation strategies on what is A, the legal risk, because there's no point trying to pay out money if there's no legal risk, and B, what are the drivers with your client and externally that might help you reach resolution.
Yeah. I mean, I think everyone has heard the word hardballing. I've never heard softballing.
Softballing.
Is there ever a benefit of being like maybe a bit too nice?
That's a good question.
Or acting nice?
I think it's always, again, it so depends on, that's when emotional intelligence comes in. There are some people, like going back to the example of what would it take for you to bring a claim against your employer. For some people, they can feel obviously like the employer might have done nothing wrong, but they might have perceived the employer's done something wrong. and they might feel really entrenched in that view. And having a lawyer come along and hardball them might not be a very effective way of bringing them round to the idea that there is a second option of conciliating and negotiating and reaching agreement. So that's when a more soft approach might be more suitable.
Okay. Earlier, as you also mentioned, that a big part of your job is dismantling someone's arguments.
Yeah.
How does that work? Because I assume, especially when it comes to your field, arguments from another lawyer are very well thought through.
Yeah. They're typically very well thought through. But they're typically one-sided. And I think going back to the relationship point of view, and that example that you used, that analogy, because it is all about relationships, you effectively think about it in the way that you've fallen out with a friend, and you've gone to someone and said, oh, they're so annoying. They've done this wrong, they've done that wrong. They never tidy up anything around the house, blah, blah, blah. And you've gone and told that friend. And then they've gone and told their friends their side of events. And it's the exact same situation that's happened, but you've got two side of events that happen. And so you might receive a letter from a lawyer that says, your client has mistreated our client. They've subjected them to this unfair process. They've tried to manage their performance in a way that's unfair. You go speak to your client and they go, no, that's not what happened at all. They've been turning up to work late. We suspect drinking on the job. They've done all these terrible things. And so effectively you've got the same set of events with two different perspectives. And what you are doing is relaying back your client's perspective and doing it in a way which sort of protects them legally and helps them get the outcome that they're looking for.
Yeah. So it's always about trying to see the holistic picture, I guess.
Well, to a degree, but also advocating for your client's view. Yeah. There's always two views on one set of circumstances. Yeah. And your job as an advocate for your client is to advocate their point of view.
How often is it also important to how to interpret law? Because I feel like often I hear the word interpretation a lot when it comes to law. What role does it play? Because at least I always assume that law is kind of binary. Yeah. Rightful, not rightful. But then there's always the word interpretation in there for some reason. Yeah.
So the way the system works is you have the statute, which is the letter of the law, the black letter law. And to take an example of unfair dismissal, you need two things for an unfair dismissal. You need two things for a fair dismissal. Otherwise, it's an unfair dismissal. You need a fair reason, step number one, which could be things like conduct, capability, redundancy. So let's say that someone's not performed very well at work. It's a capability issue. So you go, okay, they're not very good at the job. I'm going to dismiss you for that. You've got a fair reason. The second thing is, have you followed the fair process? Now, what does a fair process look like? Like that is super, super broad. And so there's a whole range of what's called case law, which are different cases where you have effectively different parties have argued in front of a judge that this process is fair, that process is fair. And that's where interpretation of the law comes in, because the principle is you have to follow a fair process. But what that fair process looks like in practice at companies that have different sizes, different levels of expertise, different levels of funds, different HR staff, all these different factors, what is fair will completely differ in every different organization. And it's completely based on the interpretation of those circumstances and those facts.
Okay. All right. I guess that's when
interpretation comes in.
And that's when we need to hire you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's when, your lawyer will look at previous cases, similar cases to your circumstances, which cases are the accepted and sort of prevailing cases on those different aspects, and apply your situation by analogy to those. And they'll be able to tell you whether you've got a strong case or a weak case, and therefore what you should be doing in terms of litigation strategy and or negotiation and settlement.
When it comes to employer versus employee, is dismissal the main topic, or are there other big topics in there?
I think the two main things we see is dismissal and breakdown of relationships, because fundamentally dismissal cuts off your access to money and cuts off your access to a livelihood, which is, a huge driver for most people because we live in the real world and we need money. So that's when there will typically be some sort of dispute. But otherwise it will be largely to do with people are still employed, but there has been a significant breakdown in the relationship, either because people feel they've been treated unfairly, they feel or allege that they have been subject to some sort of detriment on the basis of discrimination or whistleblowing or something like that.
What are reasons for feeling treated unfairly? Is it anything from being demoted or
and anything and everything that you could think of that might happen in the workplace that can leave you feeling aggrieved in some sort of way?
I've actually only heard about a demotion for the first time in my life. Is that actually a legal thing? Can you demote someone?
I mean, again, it depends on what the employment contract says, because that's sort of the governing framework of the relationship. And it depends on the circumstances as well. Has that individual committed misconduct, which has led them to being demoted? So it can be a thing. I mean, it's usually high risk to do so, but it can be a thing.
Okay. Oh, that's good to know. I'm actually, well, I'm not happy that dismissal is the most common reason.
Yeah.
But I'm somewhat happy because that's where I wrote down a ton of questions.
Okay.
How do you even prepare? And I kind of want to take this step by step. Because I think back to what you said earlier, where people might reach out to an employment lawyer actually when it's too late, or do their research when it's too late. So I want to go step by step from you are in an interview process all the way to you got laid off.
Okay, so like a whole life cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say I am interviewing with a new company.
Mm-hmm.
So any stage all the way until I get the contract. What are things I should consider? Are there parts of the contract you always would suggest be extra careful when you read it? Should I look up, are there unions in this industry that I should be part of? What are things I should consider before it's too late?
So again, with the general caveat that none of this is legal advice and you must seek your own legal advice.
I will write that under every single reel that I post.
Yeah, perfect.
Disclaimer.
Yeah. Just generally, I mean, look at the things that matter to you in an employment contract be the main thing. So the key ones are always going to be things like your salary, your holiday, notice periods, I think, are things that people neglect to think about. And two things just to think about with notice periods more generally is they are protective and prohibitive. So a 1 month notice period, let's say that you get dismissed for redundancy, the business has gone under, that only gives you a 1 month runway to find a job somewhere else before you are financially impacted. So you might want to think, well, maybe a longer notice period might be in my interest. The flip side of that is if you have a 6 month notice period, if you find a job somewhere else in another industry or in another company and they've got a position open and they need to hire someone now, having a 6 month notice period kind of puts you in a bit of an awkward position because you can only really say to them, I'll join you in 6 months' time, by which time they might not have a need for that, or they might go for a candidate who can join sooner. So those are things you should think about. It's both protective and it could potentially be prohibitive. So you need to consider those factors and work out what's going to be best for you. The other thing to think about, I think, as you get more and more senior is what's called restrictive covenants. So these are things like prohibitions against you competing against the company with a new employer, prohibitions against you soliciting current clients of your employer when you move somewhere else, and also prohibitions against you taking or approaching your ex-colleagues to come join you when you move. So those are all things that you should think about, and obviously you need to take your own legal advice on them and how they might impact you.
Okay. And these things all have to be in the contract. There's nothing that an employer can add in later, or?
So no, I mean, those aspects will all be set out in the employment contract, which forms these sort of express terms that govern your relationship with your employer.
Okay. As well, okay, in this scenario, well, we're interviewing for a company, we get a contract. is there any legal problem in me using this contract to renegotiate with my current employer?
What, as in you go and you say, well, I've been interviewing a big corp down the road and they want to pay me 20 more grand.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you can always have this. You can always have conversations with your employer about pay.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you feel like you're not getting paid enough, like have that conversation if you want to. They might say no. And they might say, well, we have our compensation review rounds every year and we'll take it into account, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, you're allowed to have conversations about pay.
Just make the conversation good and be emotionally competent when you do it. So
yeah.
break down relations and end up with you.
Yeah, exactly.
On that little sidetrack, is there anything else we should consider when actually talking with our own employer? Something we should never mention?
Like what? What do you have in mind?
Like, what are reasons why maybe the company might fall out with me because they might feel mistreated by me, or should I not go to work? And maybe this is part of don't bring your full self to work. Should I not mention that I drink alcohol or do recreational drugs or whatever else someone might do in their free time? Are there certain things just never mention that?
I think every workplace is different. Like what is tolerable at some workplaces is going to be very different to what's tolerable at other workplaces. And some workplaces have a much more broad, diverse range of staff in terms of age range, background, both like culturally, social, economically, all these kind of things, which obviously means because you're interacting with so many different people, you might need to temper certain aspects of your personality versus if you work in a small startup where it's 4 people who are all best friends, it's a very different scenario. It's a very different situation. I generally think the main thing, and this is just sort of general life observations, is if you're good at your job and you get on with people, then 9 times out of 10 you're going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah,
it's typically people that are not good at their job and who don't get on with people who find they have issues at work. Because from an employer's perspective, if I'm like, Seb is great, he always does his work on time, he's a great culture carrier in the office, everyone loves him, like why would you then have an issue with Seb?
That's a very fair point. I was actually wondering exactly with that, are companies using return to office policies as a reason to have a fair reason for dismissal of incompetent employees? Like, they don't actually care if people come in the prescribed amount of times. It's more like if Charlie, random name, doesn't perform, we can at least be like, hey, we saw you didn't announce that you weren't going to come in, so you didn't abide to the company rules. Is that one of the reasons why they have return to office? Or
I think, return to office is quite like a hot topic and something that we talk about a lot. So I have to be sort of quite careful about how I talk about this. But I think just a general observation is that, again, going back to the point, for there to be a fair dismissal, you have to have a fair reason and to follow the fair process. And so in pure conceptual terms, I mean, lying about the reason that you're getting rid of someone isn't a fair reason.
Okay,
so
that's good to know.
Yeah. But I don't have any sort of live examples or what I can give on that. So I think, not much I can say on that.
I mean, that's a fair point. I feel like after this, listening to this this episode, I think it's a good thing if most people look into fair dismissal reasons, I guess, in general, just be educated. Or
I think one of the things that surprises most people when I say I'm an employment lawyer and they ask me about my job, and they always ask questions, what's one thing I should know as like an employee about employment law? I think most people don't realize that you don't have any rights against ordinary unfair dismissal until you have 2 years of service.
Oh, okay. What is ordinary?
So ordinary unfair dismissal is effectively if you worked at your job not yet 2 years, or I think it's minus statutory period, so it's effectively like 1 year and 51 weeks. Before that period, your employer can get rid of you for any reason, as long as it's not an automatically unfair reason, like discrimination or because you've blown the whistle. So if you've worked somewhere for a year and your employer's just like, oh, he's just a bit rubbish at his job, rather than having to follow any kind of process, they can just say, right, you're out of here. And you don't have a right to bring an unfair dismissal claim, an ordinary unfair dismissal.
This is a perfect segment into the second part of the life cycle of joining a company, probation period.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean probation period technically is 2 years?
Yeah, so it's really weird. A lot of people think because we have these probation periods that if you pass your probation period after 6 months, let's say, then you suddenly have protection after that, and your employer has to follow a fair process to get rid of you. And that's not the case until after that 2-year mark when someone has unfair dismissal rights. Typically, when you have a probation period in the UK, it allows, going back to that point about notice periods, let's say normally you have a 2-month notice period. During your probation, typically the only difference between your normal employment after probation and your time in probation is that during probation, your notice period is shorter, maybe a week or 2 weeks. Yeah. So that if things aren't working out during the probation period, rather than employer having to give you 2 months notice and keep you on for 2 months or pay you out for 2 months in lieu of notice, they can say goodbye to you in a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah. Also, doing my research, there is no fixed law in the UK on how long probation periods can be, right? So it's the employer that sets the probation period.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, there's also market standards, right? And like I said, unfair dismissal is after 2 years. So why there would be a probation period after longer than 2 years doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like market standards usually about like 3 to 6 months. And like if you're an employee, going back to looking at your employment contract, if you were to look at that and go, there's a 1-year probation period, it doesn't provide you with much stability. So that would be something that you'd question when signing the agreement.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very good point. I guess it's a point where they compete.
Mm-hmm.
One last point to when you're still in the contract, looking at the contract period. Let's say you sign the contract. What does signing the contract actually mean? Because I've also heard of people who signed a contract. They were in an interview process with a different company at the same time, got the contract a bit later, but the contract was way better. So they signed that one and they just call the other company and be like, hey, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Is that legal?
Yeah. So again, without getting into like any specific advice, just the more general conceptual point is the way the UK legal system works is on a basis of loss. So you can bring a claim for a breach, but you have to demonstrate loss. So taking that scenario, for example, you've entered into a contract to start employment at company A. You've then had a better offer from company B. So you have breached your contract with company A by signing the one with company B. So there's a breach of contract there. So the question is, well, what happens next? You've breached the contract, but you have to ask the question, well, what is company A's loss?
Yeah.
Because that's how the court system works, is you go to court to get compensation for your loss. And in that scenario, it's quite hard for a company to identify what their financial loss is. And then it's another question for them of, do they want to pursue you as an individual through a court system for that loss?
Yeah. So they might only do it, I guess, if you're high level, like let's say CFO or something, the recruitment time takes forever, that there's actually a financial benefit, I guess, for them to recoup this loss, I guess.
Precisely that. And, a court is not going to order. There's also a slight imbalance between an employer and an employee because their contribution to one another is different. An employee provides labor to a company and a company provides finance to an individual. So there's a clear, for this flow, it's always clear what an individual's loss is because it's financial. But for a company, they have to try and quantify what the loss of that labor or future labor is financially. So it's quite a lot for, if let's say you're quite junior, you're 23 years old, you've had a contract with company A that pays you 40K and you found one at company B that offers you 50K. So you renege on that initial contract with the company A. Is that company going to pursue you through a court system?
Yeah.
I mean, there's something to think about.
But when you talk about loss, you just said potential loss. Because when I think of loss, it means I have something, I lose it. But potential loss, does that mean we think we can make 5 million doing this one thing?
Mm-hmm.
But because that employee in this example didn't sign, who has that market expertise whatsoever, we lost potential revenue.
Yeah.
So you can also claim a loss on something that actually hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, future loss.
Okay.
So you have your past losses and you have your future losses. So let's say, for example, an individual alleges they were unfairly dismissed by their employer. They might claim, well, when I get to court, I've been out of work for 6 months. So I have a past loss of 6 months of my salary. But I also have a future loss because the market's really bad right now and I'm a very specialist role. And it's going to take me 10 months to find another job. So that's a future loss as well that they would claim.
Yeah, that's very good to know. Okay, we covered everything from preparing to get your contract, signing the contract, difference between probation period and the 2 years until you can have
a right against ordinary unfair dismissal.
Yeah, so much specific terminology.
Yes, because any stage, for example, if someone's alleged they've been fired because of their race or their gender, there's no 2-year period for that. The law effectively says that if you do that at any stage, it's legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I've worked at a company for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe even less than 2 years. But I fear restructuring or any of the other common reasons for a layoff. I might not be performing, or do you have any other examples why people get laid off? What are the most common reasons for layoffs?
I mean, typically it's performance or it's like redundancy, because if you're performing, there's no necessary reason for your company to get rid of you. So if you're a good performer, then typically it's because there is a diminished need for your role.
Yeah.
So let's say new AI has been brought in that can do your role, or your company's acquired another company. Suddenly because that company has a marketing team, there's 10 people in the marketing team, they only need 5. So there's diminished need for that role. These are all kind of different scenarios in which that can take place, even if you're a good performer.
Yeah. If I fear this potential layoff coming, how should I prepare? Or even if I don't even fear that layoff coming, what should I do to prepare? We already said it's a good idea to write down anyways all the projects you work on and the deliverables you've done, also for, I guess, promotion purposes. But should I join a union? What are things most people might not think about?
I think, and again, it's difficult for me to sort of comment on this because it starts to veer into the part of legal advice. But I think the main thing is that if you're a good performer, unfortunately, if redundancies are coming around because the company isn't performing very well, or because there's a diminished need for your job, because there's too many people doing that role, or the company's restructuring or something like that, like there isn't anything you can really do. There's no sort of magic bullet that you can offer, or sort of an aha, I got you because I have amazing legal advice type thing. There's not really a huge amount you can do in those scenarios. The only, I think, aspect within your control of those is your performance. So really the best defense against any of that kind of stuff is just to be a good performer.
Okay. You didn't say union, or you didn't actually comment on union. Is there a reason for that?
Just because, and this is just from my line of work, is unions are quite uncommon. So I don't really know much about unions, just because in the UK there isn't as strong a union culture as in other European countries, where I know it's like France, Spain, Italy. I know unions are really important. So it's just something I have very little knowledge or expertise on, because the type of industries that I advise clients in don't tend to be unionized.
What about maybe some form of insurance? Because I know I grew up in the Netherlands. A lot of people in the Netherlands I actually don't know what the insurance is called, but pretty much it just gives them the right to a lawyer if they are laid off. Is there something similar in the UK that you would recommend, or?
I imagine there is some kind of like income protection insurance if you're laid off. But again, I tend to advise around the other side of things, so it's actually not something I really know much about.
Okay. So you advise us not to get it so that it's easy.
I don't advise anything on this podcast. I advise absolutely nothing. This is all just discussion.
That is a very fair point. Almost got you into trouble there. Soon you'll sue me.
Yeah.
Last person I want to be sued by is a freaking lawyer. All right. You feared layoffs. You got laid off. Anything we should consider then? Or is that the point where it's too late?
No, it's not the point where it's too late. Again, just have to be careful. But I think the main thing to think about is if you're being laid off, the main thing is just always get a lawyer whenever you feel like the relationship might be breaking down. It's always useful to speak to a lawyer at that stage because they'll be able to provide you proper guidance on what your rights are and where potentially those rights may have been breached, such that you can have a claim. And that's probably as much as I can say on that, unfortunately.
Sure. Oh, yeah, I mean that's fair. You said always get a lawyer. Nowadays, people ask ChatGPT, how do you use AI as an employment lawyer?
Yeah, this is really interesting. I use, and we're encouraged to use AI, and we have our own.
You're even encouraged to use it.
We're encouraged to use it. It's a fantastic tool. And I use it daily. And we have it sort of sat in its own like confidentiality ringed off box. So we can put, in theory, client information into it and it doesn't get sent back to, ChatGPT main hub. It's all boxed off. It's our own version of sort of an AI software effectively, that protects client confidentiality. People using it for legal advice will be sorely disappointed. When it first came out, I was fascinated in this. I was like, is this going to end lawyers' jobs? And you ask it a really basic question. You ask it, what is unfair dismissal law in the UK? And it's really good at telling you what that law is. And you ask it to apply it in a situation, it's rubbish. Absolutely rubbish at it. And if you phrase a question in a certain way, so you say, for example, how is, and then you give it a scenario, this scenario where this person has been laid off, unfair dismissal, it will tell you all these different ways in which it is unfair dismissal. If you then rephrase it in the way it's like, how is this exact same scenario not unfair dismissal, it will do the exact same thing. So the problem is that the prompt you give it necessarily dictates the answer you get out of it.
That's a very interesting thing that you mentioned there, because in the episode with Niha that I will be publishing before this episode, so people should jump back into that one. She says, so the whole episode is about ethics in AI.
Yeah.
And she says AI is heavily trained on not giving biased information.
Yeah.
So it's being trained and is already quite good at not necessarily answering in the way you bias the question. So it's interesting that you mentioned that point.
Yeah. So, my experience of using it when I've tested it to ask it legal questions and applying it to scenarios is, I don't think it's very good. Anything complex, it's really not very good. And also it's not reasoning software. And this is my understanding as like a ignorant employment lawyer rather than a data scientist. But you can't ask it to reason very effectively. And so much of our job is reasoning. What it's really good for, what it's really, really good for, and that I use it for quite a lot, is testing what I'm writing. So, for example, a large part of my job is writing letters back to other lawyers who are alleging claims against our clients and things like that. So I might write this letter and I'm looking at this letter. I spend maybe 2 hours writing it. And I might put it through our AI and say, make the sentences shorter, make it more punchy in its tone, and make some of the phrasing slightly more aggressive. And it'll do that. And I'll reread that letter and I'll go, okay, that's quite good. And then I might go, actually, that's a bit too much. And going back to the, emotional intelligence point, we might be going at someone who feels really entrenched, who might feel quite vulnerable. So I might write a letter and go, I don't think that is quite the right tone. And I might use the AI to help adjust that tone.
Do you ever do the reverse? You put in the letter from the other lawyer and you ask to interpret the tone.
Yeah, so this is interesting. It's quite good at interpreting tone by looking at sort of certain adjectives and things like that in there. But I mean, tone is also one of those things that you can read a letter and you can assess the tone quite early on about how someone is feeling about a certain situation. So I use it more so that rather than where it may have taken me 4 hours to write a letter and really nail how I want it to sound, I can do that in like 3 hours or 2 hours. So it's an efficiency tool, which is really, really useful.
I'm just astonished that it takes you 3 hours to write a letter.
Oh, but these are like 6, 7, 8 page letters.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's not a postcard, dear mum and dad.
Also, as someone who doesn't write letters or emails or anything else in text messages, I'm just astounded you can read tone without emojis.
Yeah, I mean, it's usual day where, I mean, it's not unusual to be writing 10,000 plus words all day, every day. It's an incredibly word heavy industry because you're writing emails, you're writing letters, you're writing investigation reports, you're writing pieces of advice. So it's a lot of written information.
Yeah. That makes me wonder, did being a radio host actually help you being a lawyer?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the radio hosting I did at university sort of recreationally, had different shows. I just think it gave me a better sense of my own voice and also a sense of sort of confidence that I think you get by presenting anything. Because a lot of the time you're being phoned by clients, having conversations with them. And you obviously want to present yourself in as confident a manner. So I think having done radio and being used to hearing your own voice, you get a sense of how you sound.
Yeah.
So you hopefully sound slightly more trained than you otherwise would.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point I will sound professional.
I think you sound very professional.
Right. Thank you very much. I was very much fishing for that.
Yeah, it was fishing.
Fishing so hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to the using AI.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned using it for emails, adjusting them. You said it's really good to do your research.
No, it's not good for research.
But you said for getting the information, just not interpretation.
Oh yeah, but like, if you can ask it a really basic question, like what is this law? What is that law? But it's not a legal research tool. It's really poor, in my view, a really, really poor legal research tool.
Okay. So if you have any legal issues, would you ask it very rudimentary questions and then directly go to the lawyer, or would you just skip the AI straight to the lawyer?
I mean, an interesting observation is that as an industry, that I can't remember which lawyer it was, but someone published a really interesting article in one of the legal journals about how more and more individuals were using AI to bring claims, to write their claims, to write letters as part of their claims and things like that, as part of sort of sidestepping getting expensive legal fees and all that kind of stuff. My view on AI is that it's very, very imperfect. I can see why people might want to use it for those kind of things. And I think as someone that's untrained, it might sound very convincing because you've typed it in there and it's given you an answer and it sounds very professional and it uses all these legal words. I just think it's something to be treated with caution. But I mean, the same way that people were probably getting legal advice from their mate down the pub or like a Reddit forum beforehand. I mean, people will always find ways of getting imperfect legal advice. So
yeah, that's a very fair point. Actually, a question from a friend of mine, where despite doing some research, I am still a bit confused. There's a new UK Parliament bill coming in.
Yeah, the Employment Rights Bill.
Their question is, what is your opinion on it? But I guess as well,
that's quite like a political question in a way, isn't it?
I think you need also maybe explain a bit what is the political aspect to it, like, because I guess a lot of listeners probably don't know what it is, and I still don't fully understand.
Yeah, so that is a good question. So the Employment Rights Bill is a bill that's currently working its way through sort of the parliamentary and the House of Lords system. So introduced by the Labour government, and it's heralded as their landmark employment rights bill to afford more significant rights to workers in the UK and protect them from what are perceived to be poor practices from employers that might be detrimental to sort of worker protection. And sort of, I guess, the political backdrop for this is that we've got a new Labour government. Well, I say new, but sort of been in for just over a year now, which has sort of come off the back of 15 years of Conservative rule. And Labour are sort of seen as more of a pro-worker, pro-union party. And as part of this, they've introduced a raft of new laws, or they will be introducing a raft of new laws and amendments to current laws, which they say will bolster workers' rights. So it's not for me to sort of comment on politically whether that is a good thing or a bad thing. But from an employment law perspective, it will change employment law quite substantially. And I think one of the main things it is going to change is going to be the that 2-year period I talked about before you can bring an unfair dismissal claim. It's said that what they want to bring in is to make that a day one right. So from your first day of employment, you're protected from ordinary unfair dismissal rather than 2 years. However, they are going to introduce effectively a probation period in which a shorter process can be followed, whether that's 6 months, whether it's 9 months, we'll have to see in the final detail. But I think that's going to be quite a significant change to the current status quo.
What is the political conversation here? Because it sounds like it's a very good thing for employees, but less good for the employer, because if they get a bad hire, it will be harder to get rid of them, or if they overhire, or for whatever reason. So I guess it could have an economical impact there if companies are not the smartest when it comes to hiring.
Yeah, and that's when we fundamentally get into like it becomes sort of a political economic view on what you think is good for a country. Like you have places like the US, which have very, very, very different employment laws. They have a concept of like at will employment, so you can get fired really easily. And they have an economy that is like roaring and booming. So some people might look at that and go, well, you know, having really stringent employment rights is actually detrimental to an economy, which is therefore detrimental to everyone. And that's one political view. Then you have other people that say, no, well, if you look at places like Germany, which is a great economic power, they have loads of protections for employers as well, and it's hard to fire people. Same with the Netherlands. I think in the Netherlands, you have to go to court to fire someone. Yeah, it's different, right?
I have a question about that, actually, because in the Netherlands, I've known enough people who've been on sick leave for up to 2 years.
Yeah, and you get paid like it's like 80-70% of your salary or something.
Yeah, like and apparently it's quite easy. Like you can just go to your psychologist, have them sign off from time to time, like, burnout.
Yeah. So and so what I mean is exactly this. It's like it's inherently political, which is why I'm sort of like reluctant to comment on it either way. It is a political party has brought in new rules aligned with their political view on what they think is the right way, and other countries have much less robust employment rights and do really, really well economically. Other countries have a lot less employment rights employment rights in general, and do really, really poor economically. And some of the complete opposite have great economy, great employment rights. So it's a complete balancing thing. But I think just from a perspective of what will impact people and companies, it's that 2-year period, which has been reduced down to 6-9 months, that I think is going to impact the most people most visibly. Yeah. And that's coming in, I think the government said it would be 2027. They're going to introduce that, right? So it's a while off, but it is in the pipeline.
Okay. Then I think we've come to the end of all the legal questions that I actually have. But just before we finish them up, if you were in my shoes and you are my guest, what would you ask yourself?
What would I ask myself? What would I want to know about myself? As in about employment law or just in general?
Employment law, You can also say in general, because actually then I have a bunch of questions about just life in general, because there's a lot of interesting things about you outside of employment law. So people should hang on in this podcast. Just because I say it's the end of the law part, that doesn't mean the podcast is over.
Yeah. No, I just think, look, I think going back to what I said at the beginning there, the thing, your relationship with your employer and your relationship with your job, for lots of people, and this is rightly or wrongly, is tied up to their emotional well-being, their sense of satisfaction. And frankly, if you're spending 8 hours, 5 days a week in one place doing one thing, like, people derive a huge amount of satisfaction or dissatisfaction from that. And I just think it's therefore important for people to have some sort of grounding in their rights and obligations associated with that, because it's important stuff.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what the next section is about.
Okay.
Because with everyone that I interview, I'm very interested in what drives them and what, I don't want to say happy life, because I feel like happy and being fulfilled is different. And personally, I chase more a fulfilled life, which is, just as you said, I think work definitely gives me a lot of purpose in life. This podcast is one of the things that gives me purpose in life, because I feel like I do something more useful with my time than gaming. Yeah. Not shaming gaming.
No, I love it. Gaming's great.
But I do feel like there's less quick dopamine rushes that I can chase, and I can learn so much stuff here.
Yeah.
And
you're creating something.
Exactly. There's a bit of vanity in there too.
Yeah,
People are going to see this, hopefully. But yeah, so this gives me a ton of purpose. As we mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, you were at the office on a Friday night until 3 a.m.
Yes.
What drives you at work? Like, what does work mean to you in life?
Yeah. I mean, so firstly, that, yeah, it was 3 a.m. last night / this morning, but that is a very much so extremely rare exception to the rule. You know, it's the first time I've worked that late in, 3-4 years. So, but it does happen. It can be necessary. And when you're in that kind of environment, a lot of it is driven by adrenaline at that stage, because you're working on something very high profile. It's very important, and that is necessitating you to be there on hand, providing support to the clients at ridiculous o'clock in the morning. But in terms of what drives me to do it, I think it's largely, it comes back for a sort of a love of what I do, like a genuine enjoyment from it, because the hours, and this is sort of, nothing unique to where I work, it's quite publicized, as the hours in law can be very tough and can be very grueling. And that is largely because, especially in a litigation role, which is a large part of my diet, you are providing support to a client as best as you can to help them through a very difficult period of being sued before a tribunal or before a court. So you have to enjoy what you do, and you have to sort of, as you said, find it fulfilling. And I think as someone who's always enjoyed the academic part of growing up, who enjoyed learning, does enjoy learning still, it is a career that requires you to be learning all the time. New laws are introduced, new cases come out. It encourages you to do that, and you have to do it to be good at the job. It is a job that just offers you so much exposure to commercial sides of different companies. It teaches you so many skills, from drafting to the softer skills of negotiations, emotional intelligence, all that kind of stuff. And I think fundamentally, people that last in the job are those that get a sense of fulfillment out of it. Because if you didn't get fulfillment out of it, there is no way you'd work the hours. Because doing something you don't enjoy for a long period of time, I can imagine must be quite a miserable existence.
Yeah. With all that said, what does work-life balance mean to you?
Yeah. Well, sometimes the scales tip more in favor of work than they do of life. And I think everyone has their own threshold and tolerance of what that looks like. Um, for some people, it is very much so 9 till 5:30, and work is compartmentalized into that box. And after 5:30, there's no more work. It is you're out of the office, or you've shut your laptop and you're doing whatever else you want. Um, and for other people, your job will take up more of your evening, especially on a weekday. And that's usually the case in most legal jobs, just because you're servicing client needs. So for me, it looks like as long as my weekends are protected and I'm able to get off at a reasonable hour on the weekdays, like that is good for me. Because I think what it looks like from my perspective is where I am now in my life and my career. I'm very focused on trying to be sort of learn as much as I can and be sort of learn technically to become as best a lawyer as I can. Because I'm still 4 years qualified. I'm still a very, very junior part of my career. And so where I am now is trying to learn as much as I can and absorb as much as I can. And I don't know if in the future I might want more balance on the life side, but it's effectively, I think everyone has to identify for where they are in their life, what their priority at that stage is, and acknowledge that priorities hugely change
Yeah.
as different life events happen, and it might not always be like that. So I think the litmus test is, as long as you are happy with your current work-life balance, then it's the right amount of balance for you. And as soon as you are unhappy for a sustained period of time, then you have to affect that change.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What I find very interesting with you is that you really deeply seem to enjoy what you're doing, and you really don't seem to mind the long hours. Where most other I have too many people in tech, and I mean they strive to work as little as they can. Even doesn't matter how nerdy they are, they seem to, not trying to shame them by calling them nerdy, but they seem to try to just be like, how much money can I make with as little hours as possible? Whereas you really seem to enjoy those hours. And I think there's no right and wrong, just as you said. It's really about what do you want for yourself.
I think that's right. I think that's completely right. And also, like, you can be really good at something, but really like not find it that interesting. And what I'm so pleased about, and this is sort of my plug for if anyone is considering becoming a lawyer, becoming an employment lawyer, is I think it is the most interesting job you can have in law, because you're dealing with people and you're dealing largely with those breakdowns in relationships. And it's like, it's interesting. Like, it is really, really interesting work. And if it wasn't interesting and I was really bored by it, the idea of working until 7:38 on weekdays consistently, I couldn't sustain that. But when you are enjoying what you're doing, it doesn't feel as much like work. And that is not to say that sometimes you just don't look at a task and go, I really don't want to do this. Because I think that happens in every job. But it's definitely made it easier when you are interested in what you do.
Yeah. You're also in a long-term relationship and you live with your partner.
Yeah.
Your partner doesn't work your hours.
No.
How do you to handle the fact that you guys have different perspectives on work-life balance or what work means to you?
Yeah.
And that you have limited the hours that you can spend with her. And on this Saturday, you're spending it with me.
And she's spending it with a friend, so.
Fair enough. But yeah, any advice on other workaholics? Like, how do you do this?
I think you just have to, I mean, like, she is the most understanding person about it. And that comes from a perspective as well that she is an incredibly conscientious worker herself. She hugely valued where she works. People love her. She goes the extra mile. And that has opened up so many opportunities for her internally where she works, including sort of new opportunities and new roles and promotion and stuff like that. So I think the point I'm trying to make is, although she doesn't work as long hours as I do, within her team and her where she works more than most other people. And so I think what we have is a really good alignment on that value, which I know it's not a relationship podcast, but I do think alignment on values is significantly more important in a relationship than alignment on interests and hobbies, because I think those are the values. The value part is what really holds a relationship together. So we're super aligned on that. And like I said, she is the most supportive person about it, because she understands that I love my job and also that it necessitates long hours. And we don't always get to spend as much time as we'd like to spend with each other, because sometimes it gets in the way. And last night's an example of that. Is that I was meant to meet up with her and a friend for dinner, and I had to cancel because I was at work. But yeah, effectively it doesn't work unless you have a partner who is willing to be supportive of that.
So yesterday when you had to text your girlfriend that you have to work late, you can make it to dinner.
Yeah.
How have you guys spoken about it in general beforehand, that this is a thing that will happen if she's in a relationship with you? And how do you handle those situations?
Yeah, I mean, I've just, I think, been super transparent about that is what it entails. I suppose being in relationships with someone who has quite a hour intensive job. And like I said, she's just incredibly supportive of it. She works considerably longer hours than lots of her peers in her job, and that's because she has that same kind of value. She drives a great sense of fulfillment and satisfaction from her job, and understands completely where I come from in deriving that same sense of satisfaction and value from mine. And we're both quite career orientated, and value that in one another, and also acknowledge that comes with certain compromises. But we are generally really good at making sure that when we spend time with each other, that it's high quality time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is the case, but I imagine if we finished up relatively early at the same time, I'd like to think that the time we'd spend with each other would be as quality time as the time we spend with each other now is. But I suppose it might be easier to both kind of just like sit on the sofa on our phones instead of engaging or going on dates and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think because the time is a little more limited than either of us would ideally like, we try to make a conscious effort to make sure we're still doing lots of fun activities, dates, dinners, making time for each other and making quality time.
I think that's a very good point. I feel like, especially if you have more time, it's easy to become lazy.
Yeah, you don't, the stuff you have, you don't value.
Yeah.
And this is like the biggest like life takeaway that I've sort of had over recent years, is that abundance of something is almost directly correlated to a lack of value in that thing. And it's the whole sort of like supply and demand, basic economic stuff you're all taught as a kid. But the thing you think that you have lots of, you don't value, and it's only when it becomes scarce that you realize how important it was. Whether it's health, whether it's money, whether it's time. And so I value my free time so much more now I have less of it. And I therefore feel like I'm quite productive with my free time generally, which is a problem in and of itself sometimes, but I think it's just generally what you have to do.
Any cute date tips or quality time tips?
Quality time, we love a breakfast. Every Friday, before work, we always go for a nice breakfast somewhere and carve out that morning time for each other. Breakfast weekday dates, hugely underrated. And then, yeah, just anything, just getting outdoors as well. We like to just go to different bits of London and walk around and window shop and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, but it's easy when you both like spending time with each other. Anything you can do, it's fun.
And you just spent 6 months together traveling the world on a sabbatical.
Yes.
How was that?
Yeah, fantastic. Best 6 months of my life, I'd say. I took a sabbatical from work, so they were absolutely amazing. I asked for 6 months off, and they made it a reality, and my partner did the same. And she went, got 6 months off her job as well. And yeah, we traveled to Southeast Asia, New Zealand, and South America in that time. They work just with each other, exploring amazing cities, cultures, food, and just had an incredible time.
Considering that you say that work is such a big part of your life and learning, how has the sabbatical changed your mindset when it comes to work or values in life in general?
It's interesting because all the stuff I was saying about loving my job, all that kind of stuff, might seem slightly contradictory to the idea of taking 6 months away from that job to go and travel. But it's really sort of like the flip side is that we were both at a stage in our life where, as much as we prioritize our careers and everything else, we were very comfortable in our careers, in the trajectory, and had built up that skill set where we started to look at what other things we wanted to achieve. And we love traveling, love going on holiday, all that kind of stuff. And there's so many places we wanted to go that we were just like, well, if we're going to do it, we're not yet too old. We don't yet have kids or a mortgage or anything that prevents us from doing it. And we had the financial ability to do it. So we were just like, let's go have an adventure. And what it gave me in perspective on work is that it when you have so much free time, it's exactly that thing that I was saying, that waking up every day in an amazing part of the world, you forgot how amazing it was to wake up in Laos or the mountains of Vietnam or Patagonia, because that was your existence day by day. You were like, well, of course I'm in Patagonia because that's where I've been all week, and that's just what my life is now. So it gave me a real sense of appreciating being in the moment and really appreciating that free time you have, and also really appreciating maximizing that free time that you have. Like I said, I don't have masses of it sometimes when work can be really busy. So what I've been really conscious to do since I got back from that sabbatical is just make sure that I'm maximizing my free time to pursue the things that interest me.
That was pretty nice.
Yeah, it was a great time. I loved it.
Yeah.
I would recommend everyone, if you want a sabbatical and you want to go travel, go and do it. Because it's one of the greatest privileges I think you can have, is to go and be able to see the world. And it's if you get the opportunity, go do it.
Any advice to how to plan it, what to do? Budgeting.
Have a partner who works in project management and will effectively sort everything out, because that's what she's amazing at, would be my tip. Yeah. And if you don't do that, or have an easily accessible project management partner, there's two different schools of thought. One school of thought is you buy a ticket, you rock up, you plan it there. That is not the way that I work. I, as I said, like to maximize everything and will exhaust myself doing as much as I can. But yeah, just find what your traveling style is and embrace it and do that.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time for me to do a sabbatical.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So now, did you feel like you maximized your weekend being on this podcast?
Yeah. I mean, this is I love this is great. This is this is a new experience for me. I get to spend time with you, which is always a pleasure. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Will you come back with some real legal advice at some point, or?
Not for as long as I have. Not for as long as I'm employed to give it professionally, no.
All right, then I hope you get fired at some point.
Thank you. That's very kind.
All right. If you do get fired, you're more than welcome to come back on this podcast.
Yeah,
also,
well, I'll have lots of grievances to air, so I'll do that.
If you don't get fired, you're also welcome to come back on the podcast.
Wonderful.
Great.
Yeah. So the open invitation to come back, effectively.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks for all the wisdom and starting points for what we should research ourselves, because it's not legal advice.
Mm-hmm.
And all the life wisdom too.
Brilliant. Well, wonderful. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being on.
Cheers.
Hey, you made it to the end of the episode. Before you leave, can you please do me this one simple favor and subscribe to the podcast? It's your free and easy way to show your support for all the hard work we put into every single episode, as well as help us reach more people and get new guests onto the show. Thank you for listening to the Untold Paths podcast.